Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Chapel. Before we begin, I just want to say a huge thank you to you. If you notice this morning, there's a dumpster on the corner of the parking lot by the concession stand heaping full with garbage. And so yesterday, our first annual Creation Caretaker Clean-a-thon, we picked up a lot of garbage. So just a big thank you to you, and thank you for all your work on that. I just want to explain a little bit of our schedule for the next hour and a half or so, because it's going to be kind of goofy. And I just want to make sure that you all understand it. We are running third period twice today. So after chapel, there's going to be break, and then there's going to be third period, and then there's going to be third period. So here's what's going to happen. After chapel, you go to break. 11th and 12th grade students, you will come back, guys. 11th and 12th grade guys, you will come back in here. Girls, 11th and 12th grade girls, you will go to the music room, okay? And you will meet with Aaron and Nikki in separate gender groups. When that ends, when the bell rings and we switch, 11th and 12th grade, you will go to your third hour class, wherever that is, okay? 9th and 10th grade, here's what you're going to do. You're going to go after chapel, you're going to go to break, and 9th and 10th grade, you will go to your third hour class right after break. Okay, when that bell rings, 9th grade guys, 10th grade guys, you will come in here. 9th grade girls, 10th grade girls, you will go to the music room and meet with Nikki. Okay? If you are confused, we will be standing in places to direct you. But I think you guys all got it. All right, it's my pleasure to welcome back. They have been here for One Body, One Hope. Aaron's been here for, I think, chapels every year at Unity. And Aaron and Nikki part of the Sioux Center. And Aaron's the dean of chapel at Door College. So join me in welcoming them.
When we are born, we have given a world built on the decisions of previous generations. A world created by their choices, some good and some bad. Decisions are constantly made without the knowledge of how they will affect us, our society, and our world. But what if we didn't know that? What if we could make choices now that would someday lead to a better world? Every person has a choice. We choose what we buy, what we wear, what we say, and what we do. These choices contribute to an ever-growing swell that drives the course of society, eventually defining an entire generation. But it all starts with one choice from one person. 2 generations ago, society began making choices that have shaped today's understanding of pornography. In 1948, Dr. Alfred Kinsey published a best-selling book that suggested that all forms of sexual behavior should be normalized and that people should pursue all sexual urges regardless of age. Businessmen capitalized on this new idea and porn magazines hit the newsstands. Many became convinced that it was cool, harmless, and the gentleman's pursuit. Then, in 1993, came the internet. And like a tidal wave, pornography flooded the World Wide Web as a generation became consumed. And now, for the first time in history, hardcore pornography can be accessed from anywhere and at any time. So what does this mean for our generation? Through new innovations in brain technology, psychology, and sociology, we now know the truth about pornography. Porn is like a drug. It can rewire the brain, form addictions, alter views about sex, objectify the human body, fuel the demand for sex slavery, and reshape society as a whole. Pornography is often violent, abusive, a degrading lie that distorts the very meaning of healthy relationships and love. We are the first generation in the history of the world to face the issue of pornography to this intensity and scale. We are also the first generation with a science-based understanding of the harm pornography can do, and with that knowledge, we feel the responsibility to share it with others. We are determined to be the generation who pursues real love and rejects its holy counterfeit. We will fight this new drug, and we will not rest until the world knows that pornography is harmful.
So did you guys know that we're coming today to talk about sex and pornography and all these really heavy, difficult topics? Did you know this is coming? Okay, good. That makes me feel a little bit better. So we are going to be talking about this today. I feel hot. Am I making sound back here? Anyway, we're going to be talking about this today, both in chapel and out in the classroom. It's just boys and girls separated a little bit. But we wanted to spend some time before we get started taking a moment to ask you to think about your sexual education. Like the video said, there's a lot of choices that are made for us, and our sexual education is one of them. You didn't get to choose how you learned about sex. Somebody else decided that for you. So take just a minute and think about it. How old were you? Where were you? Who were you with? Was it a positive experience or a negative experience for you? And I'm going to take a minute and share my story with you. I was 4 years old when my sexual education began, a choice that I didn't make. Apparently, I don't remember any of it, I was 4, but my mom says that I was at a neighbor's house and I was playing dolls with my neighbor girl, and I came running back into the house bawling. My mom scooped me up in her arms and said, "Sweetheart, what's going on? What happened?" And I said, Mommy, I was playing dolls with Brittany. And a little 4-year-old girl said, "Have you seen a little girl? I saw my mom do it, I saw my aunties do it, but I nursed my babies. I used to take my baby doll and put her under my shirt, pretend I was nursing her." And apparently I was nursing my baby. And Brittany said to me, "Boobs aren't for babies. Boobs are for boys." 4 years old. And I was horrified. I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know how to assimilate it. I was running home to my mom and she comforted me. After that experience, I was pretty protected. I don't think a whole lot happened to me between the ages of 4 and maybe 5th grade. Is 5th grade when you get to talk? 6th grade, something like that? I was pretty innocent. And around 5th grade, when we were supposed to be talking about it in school, my mom took me aside and said, "Hey, it's time for you to talk." And she gave me this wonderful book, and I read the book, and it made me feel creepy and whatnot. But it was okay. It wasn't that big of a deal. We had to talk in school. And yeah, beyond that, I made really good choices. I felt very confident in myself. I had a really great relationship with my dad. I had really good friends, and I didn't make a whole lot of mistakes. So although my sexual education started out kind of iffy, it turned out to be pretty good. And I'm just going to go and polish my halo for a little while and let Aaron tell you his story and what happened to him.
My mic's not doing this. Okay. All right. My sex education started in 4th grade. I was going to Richmond Christian School in British Columbia, and there was a big series of undeveloped land and blackberry bushes at the back of our property. I went back during recess one day, and a boy in my class by the name of Michael Smith said, "Hey Aaron, check this out." And he had found a stash of Playboy magazines back there. And so my first introduction to sexuality at all was through pornography. And one at a time, Michael Smith invited the rest of the kids in our class back behind the blackberry bushes to see what it is that he had found. And all of us, before we'd ever heard from our parents or our teachers or anybody else, it was an introduction to sexuality that had everything to do with porn. Now when I saw it, of course my mind is fascinated by what it is that I'm seeing. It seems intriguing, and yet I have not found a way to connect it to anything else in the rest of my life. It just sort of existed in a separate level. In fact, this went on for several years in my life until finally in about 7th grade, I decided to ask my older and wiser sister about this whole sex thing. So I'm in the middle of telling her what it is that I know, and she says, "Well, tell me what you do know." And I'm explaining this all to her, and then she interrupts me at one point in time and says, "Aaron, you do know that you actually have to have sex in order to have a baby, right?" I did not. I thought all of this time that sex was something that people hid behind blackberry bushes to be the back lots of Christian schools, and that it wasn't actually something that was part of it. So my understanding of sexuality and my understanding of spirituality the rest of my life were like worlds apart. And I would have to say I spent the next number of years trying to figure out a way to reconcile those back together. Because whenever anybody I knew who was a Christian talked about sex or sexuality, all I heard associated with was the word no and feelings of shame and guilt and nothing beautiful or positive. Nobody ever told me that actually you being made like this is actually part of you reflecting the image of God within you. And I started to realize over time that sexuality isn't the world's story to tell. It's our story to tell. This is God's gift to us, the first blessing we ever received in Scripture. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and increase in number." The first blessing God ever gave us was our sexuality. The way that God made us the most like Him is in our sexuality. And so what I wanted to do, and we wanted to do with you guys today, was sort of go back through and talk about how do we reclaim this conversation as ours, and how do you figure out how to have a positive view of sex for Christians? Because I'm really sick and tired too of doing like the cleanup stuff afterwards. This is what I mean by that. More and more and more people are coming into college, and I'm helping guys and sometimes girls deal with pornography addictions that they're 8 to 10 years into. I work at Door. This is the #1 pastoral care problem I think that I deal with in my office. It's people coming in with distorted ideas of sexuality, of self, of relationship, pornography, and they just simply want out. And the problem is someone introduced them to this, or they stumbled upon it before they ever even had a choice. It's not a guilt thing. I'm not here today to guilt anyone. Rather, help us understand how do we reclaim and get back to the place. How does a Christian reconcile their spirituality and their sexuality and come back together? We have a vested interest in this now too, because we have 3 sons and a daughter, and the kid at home was asking all sorts of questions about this, right? Kids have interesting questions. I was watching NFL football with my 11-year-old, and you know what kinds of commercials, of course, all come up during football games because they know they have a primarily male audience. We sit down that night for supper, and my 11-year-old turns to us and says, "Hey, Mom, what's a reptile?" She's like, "Well, you know, like an alligator, it's a full-blooded animal, like say, blah, blah, blah." No. What's a reptile dysfunction? Maybe you should ask your dad that question. I think was the next one that came out. Because he's watching all these Cialis and Viagra commercials that come on during NFL football games on Sunday afternoon. And so this is the introduction, right, that my 11-year-old is getting into this conversation. Not exactly in the driver's seat where I want to be leading and talking about this. So we have our own vested interest in this too. As a husband and wife, being in a relationship now. I told you where it all started in 4th grade. That took me years to put that back together. It took me years to recover a really distorted idea of sexuality. By the time I was 16 and had my driver's license, it was so bad I was at a point where I would spend my lunch breaks in strip bars, having lunch, and just absolutely distorted view of women, of humanity, of my own sexuality, and nobody in the church telling me, you know, this is really destroying you. And this is gonna suck life out of you. It's not gonna give you what it is that you're actually looking for in life. So, Nikki and I have found out, my friend at Nord actually came up with this term for us. And we actually joke with this. He calls us the sexperts. But I realized the only thing it takes to actually be a sexpert is a willingness to talk. Because there aren't enough people within the church who are just simply having these conversations, and we're not developing healthy sexual ethics. So we're hoping in some small way to help change that with you guys in conversation today. So this is why we're here. Porn is a $97 billion global industry. So just to get your head around that, that alone is the equivalent of all of the revenue of Microsoft, Apple, Google, Amazon, and Netflix all together. $97 billion global industry. In the U.S. alone, that's $13 billion. Again, so put it in perspective, that's the total revenue the NFL, NBA, and Major League Baseball put together. So that's one form of entertainment that I think we would often recruit that is out in front of everyone. Everybody talks about sports. The one that nobody's talking about, but everybody in culture seems to be engaging in, even to a greater extent than sport, is pornography. A powerful, powerful industry. The average age of first exposure to hardcore online pornography is 11. Every year right now, that age is going down, going down, going down, because we're putting cell phones and other things in the hands of kids at younger and younger ages. And this is what scares me to death about this. We will make you take a driver's license test before we give you a 1,000-pound vehicle that goes hurtling down a highway at 60 miles an hour, because we know there should be some responsibility to this. But we will give you the internet of the world at your fingertips without any form of education or help or coaching or advice. Nobody told me before 4th grade, Aaron, if you look at this stuff, this will do something to your brain. It will start wrecking you. And so we need to figure out a way to have better conversations about that as a community together. This is going to be a bathroom one. The largest consumer demographic of internet pornography is 12 to 17-year-olds. That sounds absolutely weird. How is it that 12 to 17-year-olds would be spending more money on pornography than anybody else? Well, here's how it works. You don't even have to pay for it. You just have to be complicit in the act of it. So here's the deal. Advertisers that hop on pornography sites pay for every click that gets made. I've often heard guys come into my office say, well, it's not really hurting anybody else because, right, like, I'm alone in this situation. Not realizing that somebody is paying for every click that you make on a computer. You are being used by a giant $97 billion corporate machine to exploit and abuse people, even though you're not even paying money for it. Someone's paying for you. And this industry is kind of underhanded because I guess if you're going to exploit people sexually for a living to begin with, you really don't care if your audience is teenagers. You don't care if you're underage. You don't care if you're going to create an addict out of you at an incredibly young age and then exploit you the rest of your life. They're not interested in that. They don't care. They're driving the $97 billion machine. At the end of the day, this adds up to the fact that in terms of the total bandwidth of the internet, 1/3 of it is porn. You know that? It's huge. The size of the internet and what it's all on is because there's so much video and picture involved in pornography, so 1/3 of it is pornographic in nature. And 20% of that pornography involves children, which is highly and incredibly illegal. And I've been in situations in our own county where we've had to go in with the FBI into somebody's home because they were in possession of child pornography and they're being arrested, they're being charged, and it was a horrible and horrific thing. And they often take me along because I got to sit and coach people through this and take care of the pastoral care side of things. Like how are we going to help put this person back together? This is often where pornography leads. And there's a whole sex tourism that's actually built around child pornography as well. This is one of the alarming new aspects of pornography as well. This is new to our generation, guys. The 1 in 4 visits to all websites are done by women. What scientists are telling us now is that the actual shape of the female brain is changing as you grow. That we think differently than we ever thought before. Everybody's always said, well, women aren't visual, or women don't think like that. But the truth is because we're becoming such a visual, internet, television-driven generation, the average person your age in high school spends 42 hours a week either in front of the internet or in front of their television set. Whether we like it or not, we are becoming increasingly visual and increasingly soundbite little snippets of information people, taking in more data than our minds can even process. And all of this adds up to the fact that teenage girls are the fastest growing demographic of pornography consumption. So it actually gets only worse from here. You can't avoid porn, can you? 12% of all websites on the entire internet are pornography. 90% of kids, 90% of kids, which includes Christian schools, by the way, of kids 8 to 16 have viewed online porn, and most of them while doing home. When I did an event like this at Alton Middle School, I asked the student body, how many of you here have seen pornography? Almost every hand in the room goes up. I asked them how many of you can define what pornography is. Crickets. We are seeing things that we don't even know how to understand and explain yet. Then I go to Southwest Christian School and ask in the high school, how many of you guys have seen porn? Because who wants to admit this stuff, right? Raising their hand. Then I have an event that night with all of their parents, and I ask them, how many of you guys have seen porn? Nobody. I'm thinking, liars. Right? So this is part of the problem. We all think that we're actually some horrible person if we say, yes, I've seen this, even if it's been accidental. You guys, last year I was doing research for an Easter Sunday sermon. I was studying the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I'm doing a sermon on this. I put in my search engine, apparently the right filters and all the time. I put the passion of Christ, but because the word passion was in there, search terms that get bought up by people who exploit this stuff. I'm searching for the story of the crucifixion and resurrection of our Savior, and because the word passion is in the title, I get pornographic images coming up while I'm trying to write a sermon. You can try to run from this all you want, and it's coming after us as well. So, I'm going to work the rest of the day with a working assumption and knowledge that most of us in this room have seen, whether we try to or not, pornography. There are times in my life where I have stopped this stuff. I've told you those stories. There are also times where we're just trying not to. And it still finds us. So what are we going to do, and how are we going to combat that? One of the problems of being online and being connected in this generation, of course, too, is that people then come looking for us. 1 in 7 kids are being solicited for sex while online. People are using these portals and these places where we connect 1 in 5 searches on every phone in America is for porn. 25% of all search engine requests are for porn. And this means that enough money is spent globally on porn each year to feed all 100 people in the world twice a week. Okay, just let that sink in for a second. Our appetites that God gave us for good things can be distorted in the ways that become destructive. And so humanity is turning on itself, and porn is raping our brains of what they're actually supposed to be used for, what we're supposed to be contributing to in the world. And so we have this amount, we could actually eliminate global hunger if we chose to use our appetites for the things of God rather than the things of men. There's no such thing as free porn. We talked about this, however you click is actually being paid for. Porn is getting worse and worse in terms of its content. I read an article a little while back by a porn producer who said the greatest challenge to our industry right now is that I'm not sure we can think anything else up anymore that hasn't been done. Like, we have gone to the absolute edges of all distorted creativity, and there's not really anything left to figure out. That's the greatest challenge. See, there's nothing else to be creative about the porn industry. How sad is that? Here's another problem with this, that 88% of porn films contain violence towards women. Okay, guys, stay with me here for a minute on this one. This is the problem that I'm seeing with guys as they hit college. If you've been exposed to pornography too young, and 88% of every clip, or every image, or every video that you see is an image of a woman being physically, emotionally abused, that has an effect on our brains. It begins to tell, and in these pictures, of course, it shows that women enjoy this. And so that distorts our ideas of what sexuality is supposed to be, and we end up with a generation of men unable to figure out what it actually means to figure out what a woman wants sexually by the time they get married. Because we've been watching this broken story for so long in front of us. And it's wrecking our ability to enjoy the very thing that God gave us to enjoy. This is also, they mentioned this in the video at the beginning, but like any other drug, pornography, that which excites us and releases the endorphins and oxytocin and all of these natural chemicals that release in our body that the God created the orgasm designed for us to experience as human beings and the enjoyment of sex, that we abuse this. And like any other drug, it takes more and more and more. That's why somebody moves from softcore porn into hardcore porn, into child porn, into acting out. There is a progression. There are numerous studies all getting done across the country realizing more and more that pornography is damaging in this regard. It acts fully like a drug. It releases in the same chemical dosages within our body the things that heroin and cocaine do within us. And this is the thing that nobody's telling us, right? We don't think we're playing with fire. We are playing with fire with this stuff. I've been amazed recently watching TED Talks and other resources online that are actually coming from the secular community. The loudest voices telling young men, you need to quit porn, guys, you need to get away from this, are coming from secular scientists who are saying this is wrecking us. This is stealing from our brains. One of the things that it's also doing for us is it's creating what they're referring to as a Viagra generation. All right, I'm going to get really explicit with you for a little bit, because we haven't so far. They call this the Viagra generation, the fact that there's more and more men who are growing up who become so desensitized to sexuality because of the movies we watch, the music videos that we see, the pornography that we're exposed to, that it desensitizes us more and more and more to the point where we have an entire generation, they're fearing, of men who will grow up unable to be sexually aroused by their own naked wife in the beauty that God created them to experience. Because what we have been, our mind has been enculturated to believe over and over and over and over and over and over and over again isn't exciting us anymore. Because like a drug, it just takes us further and further down with these larger dosages. And it's wrecking and destroying relationships. And so men need chemical synthesis to help their bodies in order to be able to get to a place where they can enjoy what they were supposed to enjoy naturally in the way that God gave us. Isn't that horrifying? This is sort of where this is all going. This is part of the story that's not getting told. One of the articles that I read was even GQ magazine. GQ magazine is starting to talk about guys who really shouldn't be watching porn anymore. It's baffling to me. I'll give you 4 quick reasons before we finish up on this piece. Why porn wrecks real sex. Here's 4. What your brain actually does on porn. So number 1, porn wrecks real sex Having spent so much time in the unnatural sexual experience with paper, celluloid, and cyberspace, they seem to find it difficult to have sex with a real human being. Pornography is toxic miseducation about sex and relationships. Toxic miseducation. The church has also been complicit in toxic miseducation for you about sexuality. And on behalf of the church, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys, that know that too many times we've not been willing to be red-faced and embarrassed and stand in front of you and talk about this. We leave our sexuality and our spirituality completely disconnected because we don't know how to talk about these things. We act like Adam and Eve walked out of the bushes one day, all red-faced and out of breath, giggling, no, I guess we just figured out. No. God created this, right? Like this is His from the very beginning. So we have to figure out a way to take our sexuality and our spirituality and put them back together. And so part of the toxic miseducation is on us. It's on our parents. It's on the church. It's on us for not being able to figure out a way to bring these conversations back together. And so that's one of the steps we're hoping to be able to do today as well. Real quickly here on this too. Biblically, we've conveyed the wrong story. And here's another way of doing it. In the Old Testament, right, you've got all these strange passages that we skip over and you've never heard sermons on. If it's a time of a woman's menstruation, she needed to be outside the camp and she couldn't go into the temple. And then like the priest Aaron had like a special underwear made for him. It's just when he was going to go into the worship place, he had to have this on because you can't come to your God with that. And all of these things have led to this culture in Christianity like sexuality is bad. The fact that you are a sexual being is wrong. Don't take your sexuality in front of God. You can't talk about this sort of thing. I heard an amazing sermon on this a little while back. It was describing all of those passages in books like Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy. And he was talking about the fact that the reason why all of these laws existed wasn't because sex was so bad, but because your sexuality was so good. Because sex is the one way that God actually made you the closest to be like Him. That in no other place in your life do you hold the potential within you to create something in your own image from nothing. Our sexuality has the possibility of that. And so this sermon argued that essentially what's going on is God saying in these passages, don't take the way that I made you closest to being like God and then flaunt it in my presence. You need to have an utter amount of respect for how it is that life is created. And I made you to be like me. The fact that we are male and female, the fact that we are different, the fact that we have to come together in a community to produce life, this is a reflection of a Trinity, of the Godhead Himself. Christians need a better understanding collectively of what sex is really all about. Another problem porn wrecks our brains is that porn wrecks real relationships. I love this quote. The real problem with pornography isn't that it shows us too much sex, that it doesn't show us enough. It cannot possibly give us the experience of real intimacy. Do you understand what they're saying? Because sex isn't about porn. Sex isn't just about the mechanics of it. Sex is about it being absolutely enamored and in love with somebody. It's all about what comes together in your entire relationship in that moment. This is why God says, save this for marriage. Because He wants it to be incredible for us. And we don't understand the power of what this is actually supposed to do with two people, bringing them together. And so all of God's laws are for us. They're designed to bring about blessing for us. They're designed to be for us. God loves us such an incredible amount that He gives us laws so we don't wreck ourselves. And that's really what this is all about at the end of the day. You don't want to be experiencing porn, and you don't want to be looking at this. Because it's not letting you look into somebody else's life. It's stealing something from your own life. And pornography detaches us from people. Nobody has ever looked at a still image porn and thought to himself, man, I wonder how her day was. Or how about her dad who's struggling with cancer right now? Does she have children? Does he have kids? What will they think when they see this? Will they see this? It's hard to take things back from the internet. We don't think about these things as people, as image bearers of God, and at the same time that we're stealing their humanity, they're stealing ours at the same time. And there's this sick, satanic, cyclical exchange taking place of humanity being robbed from us through this process. And all the while, like, you hear God in the background being like, I want more than this for you. I wanted more than this for you. Pornography isn't more sex, it's actually less. It's a paler, weaker, cheaper version of what it is that I really want. Porn wrecks our view of men and women. We talked about this earlier in reference to the whole notion of a Viagra generation. Look at this quote from Naomi Wolf. Today, real naked women are just bad porn. Now think about this for a second. If you've seen a falsified image and something that's been photoshopped again and again and again and again, and the only pictures of nudity that you've ever seen are fake, when you actually see real nudity, your understanding and assumption of what it's going to be is distorted. Because beauty is an enculturated thing in our minds, right? What we thought as the world was beautiful in the 15th century is incredibly different than what we believe it is in the 21st century. Our ideas of what beauty is are subjective. You can even go to a different part of the globe. Nikki and I, when we go to Liberia, we find it fascinating there when men and women interact with each other. All the pastors there were actually making fun of me one day, and I couldn't figure out why, because they thought my wife was skinny. And they were asking me if I didn't make enough money in the United States and if I needed people to give to me. Because in Liberia, the greatest compliment you could be paid as a man is if your woman was full-figured, because that meant you could provide. So their ideas of what meant what something was beautiful was entirely different because of the culture that they were in. So our brains, you are impressionable. And if you continue to watch something that is fake, it wrecks that ego. We have a hard time getting back to it. Fourth problem with porn is that porn makes us want to watch more porn. And like a well-worn path in the forest that gets treaded over and over and over again, your brain is a series of neural pathways. And so if you continue to think sexual stimulus associated with pornography leads to a response of my sexual satisfaction, and that process is repeated over and over and over and over and over again, whenever you think about sex, that's what you think about. I do a lot of counseling with early married couples. One of the greatest complaints I hear from young women all the time, 3 months into their marriage, because they've been told all their lives by the church, sex is wrong, sex you can't do it, sex is terrible, sex, when you think about sex, you should feel shame, sex is all about guilt, don't do it, don't do it, no, 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 no. As they finally get in this moment, they're like, I'm allowed to have sex now. Pastor Aaron, can you tell me, how do I get the guilt out of my brain? Because we've been so shaped by the fact that this is about shame and guilt and no. See, we are impressionable, and we have to acknowledge that about ourselves. But here's the beautiful thing about our life. When you go to sleep at night, 200 million new cells are created in your brain every night when you sleep. God actually has a system built into the way we are anatomically designed. There's a layer between your skull and the outside of your head that actually has fluid that while you sleep washes your brain. Your brain literally showers at night while you sleep, and 200 million cells are created while you sleep. This is the genius of the God that we have. So in the same ways that we bring about destruction into our life, he says, I bring new life again and again. In fact, they even hardwired it into your being that you can be recreated while you sleep, because I work harder than you do to make you new. I did it in the story of Jesus. I will do it in your sexuality. I will do it again and again and again, because I'm not done with you yet. What a beautiful, incredible God we serve who seeks to make us whole. Because I know that as I talk, there's a ton of you here who are thinking the same thing that I'm thinking. I've done this before. I've seen this stuff. I have some sexual distortion going on in my mind, things that I think about. And what I don't want you to feel or experience in this moment is guilt, because that is Satan's tool, absolutely, to destroy us and keep us in prison. God makes us new. God recreates us. My sexual education began in the 4th grade. It started all over again when I met my wife. It came clean of what everything else had gone through in my life. And met a woman who was going to help me understand all of this and make something new and create something beautiful together. We do get recreated. God recreates us in beautiful, incredible ways. Because he's a great artist. He's bringing us new things. He's making us new. He's creating us over and over again. I'll talk a little bit here. I'll pray for you for a second on what I'm talking about.
the other night, right? And he was like, who's your favorite artist? And like most people do when they ask a question, he didn't really care about my answer and proceeded to tell me what he thought the true answer was. And he continued about his struggle to recognize who he said was the greatest of all time. He said, I mean, is it Shakespeare? Is it Frost, Picasso, Michelangelo? Is it the Beatles, Rembrandt, Michael Jackson, Beethoven? And he went on and on and on about who he thought was the greatest, not recognizing even this infrastructure to answer that question was misled and outdated. And so finally, I kindly smiled and said, okay, so you asked me who was the greatest of all time. Now, you tried to share yours, so let me share mine, because there's no debate about who is the greatest, because all those other artists you mentioned, yeah, the greatest made them. And see, this artist, he's a beast, a lion, the name above names. You don't even realize it, but you encounter his art every day. And he deserves all of the acclaim, he deserves all of the fame, because all other artists pass away, but he remains. Oh, by the way, his name is God, Yahweh, Creator, your Maker. He's infinitely creative, sir. There is no one greater. And I can tell it looks like you're starting to get mad at me, but don't be jealous just because your favorite artist might bend words and my favorite artist bends galaxies. See, in the palm of his hand, he holds all the sand, the author of life, when he whispered, let us make man. See, what if I told you that you are God's poetry? You were created because someone else was creative. See, long ago he picked up his eternal paintbrush, dipped it in his glory, placed us in his story, and said, they will live for me. And I know it sounds outlandish, but we're not the product of random chances. And in fact, we're not even the vine. We're actually the branches. In the same way we're not the artist, we're actually the canvas. Because in an instant, God started to make art, shaped you uniquely and beautiful, individual from the start, and he touched the canvas of flesh and said, this one is better than the rest. I'll give them so much of my image, so even when they're hot off the press, you can still see the steam of my breath. And so he crafted and he made every arm and leg, ligaments, tendons, muscles, blood vessels, veins, arteries. He said, they're going to have a part of me. And about that time, the guy butted back in and said, that sounds good and all, but I'm wretched and filthy, but God won't use me, will he? And I said, see, that's what's awesome about God. No matter what we've done, he can still use us. Even though other artists, once they have broken equipment, they start to make excuses, God instead doesn't refuse us, and neither does he accuse us. He redeems us in Jesus, promises never to lose us. So stop saying that you're dirt. Stop saying you're scum of the earth. You ought to be careful about how you talk about someone else's work. Because if we've trusted in Jesus, we can stop saying we're filthy. I mean, all that is anyways is just pride clothed in false humility. I mean, if we only believed that we're truthfully created in his likeness, then we'd stop saying we're wretched, filthy, shameful, guilty, but instead knowing if we trusted Jesus, we're righteous. I mean, don't you see we're drawn to repentance because of his kindness? So how dare you call yourself worthless when he says you're priceless? But see, the best part is since God is ultimately for God, he'll get glory out of you, whether you like it or not, because even temple ruins point to an architect, even if the temple is shot. And all I'm saying is that he's behind it all. So why do we insist on giving him no credit at all? I mean, he's the one that gave Van Gogh the imagination to change the face of painting. Tell me, who else is responsible for Mozart being able to compose at age 5 without formal training? See, he made the fingers that Beethoven used to make art on the keys. For Pete's sake, he made Stevie Wonder, one of the best musicians of our time, and he couldn't even see. And that's why in the same way that our lives are borrowed time, this poem is borrowed lines, because the most ridiculous statement we could ever say is that this poem is mine, because we're not self-sustaining, no, we're not self-creating. Technically, nothing we do is original, we're just imitating, and that's not a diss. All I'm trying to say is this: even our own creativity is nothing more than an outflow of his. And so, I'll end with this. You know that quote about giving credit where credit is due? Well, if that's true, it's about time we give God his rightful credit too. Because he's a God in the business of making old things new. And here's the truth: he's not through with making a masterpiece of you.
Where he might have been sitting in a a strip club when he was 17 years old and looking at online pornography and everything else. I wasn't doing those things. But I didn't tell you my whole story, and my story continued 20 years ago when I sat in school too. I'm a graduate of Unity Christian, and I don't remember the context, I don't remember why we were doing it. There was a group of girls, and we were being spoken to by a woman who was going to talk to us about sex. And we were sitting kind of all in a circle, and as she started, she was like, "Oh, I forgot my gum." And she spit out her gum in her hand. And she was like, "Here, will you take this for me?" And she gave it to the person who was sitting there. And she said, "You know, while I'm talking, just go ahead and pass that around. If you want to take a chew on it, go ahead, that's fine. If you don't, just pass it around." And then she started talking, and she talked about promiscuity and keeping yourself pure and how important it was to, not give yourself away to boys and that sort of thing. And by the time she got done, she put her hand up for the gum, and it had made it all the way around the room. And some people had chewed it, and some people hadn't, and some people had stuck it on their, desk for a little while and whatever. And when it came to the end and she picked it up, she held it up and she said, "And let me tell you this, if you have sex before marriage, you are this chewed up piece of gum. This is you. Disgusting, used, dirty. People have touched you in ways that you shouldn't be touched, and this is the legacy that you get to have." Talk about guilt and condemnation. But I believed that at the age of 14, 15, 16, or however old I was. I put up walls around myself to ensure that I would never be that dirty, disgusting, filthy piece of gum. And that story that Aaron talked about women who come in later and say, "I don't know how to do this because I've been told no for so incredibly long," that was totally my story. And we're here today not because we really enjoy talking to teenagers about sex. Every morning when we do this, I get up and I go, "Oh man, that's a heavy day, and it's kind of hard." And we've been in schools where people have been incredibly receptive, and we've been in schools where people haven't said a word and have completely shut down. But the truth of the matter is we believe that this is so important. And we've seen friends experience things in their lives that we don't want to happen to you. I have friends who are going through divorces, who have had affairs, who have been raped, who can't experience sexual pleasure with their husbands, who are addicted in horrible ways. And we believe that a lot of it is because nobody talked to us about this when we needed to hear the truth of Christ and the truth of what sexuality can be. So that's why we're here. We're going to be here for, the next 2 class periods, and what we're going to do is just spend some time with you one-on-one. We're not your parents. We're not your teachers. We're really not anybody that you know. Well, I don't know if some of you know us, but for the most part, you guys are strangers to us. So consider it a get out of jail free card. You can ask what you want to ask. You can say what you want to say. And let me just tell you that talking to your friends about this, while important and necessary, is not necessarily the best place to get information. Because a couple of sexual experiences or looking at online pornography or reading a book does not make one an expert. And Aaron and I aren't necessarily sexual experts, and yet we have that. So we're open books. We'd love to talk to you in a spirit of grace, not of condemnation. And we just hope that the rest of the day is a blessing to you. Aaron's going to come up and pray.
Pretty good. Father, we affirm once again that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. We don't always understand all the things that you put in place in this world for us, and so often, where we lack understanding, we fill in with our own assumptions. We've taken things for ourselves, or just simply abused your good gifts. Father, we understand that our sexuality is one piece of that. We are broken, and we need your hand, and we need your healing. We need your voice of truth, because there are so many lies being spoken around us over and over and over again about what it means to experience pleasure, what it means to come alive, or what it means to truly be human. Father, we want to acknowledge that you wrote the book on this, that you know what we stand in need of better than we know. And we're asking you to help us to trust you in that, and you have great and glorious things in mind from us. You are not the God who pulls out on us. You are the revealer of truth. You are the giver of all good things. Every good and perfect gift comes from you, and our sexuality is no different. Father, we thank you for it, we praise you for it. We just pray that you use this day in some small way to increase our understanding of who we are as sexual beings and how we can use that for your good. In your name. So yeah, we're going to go to a break time, and then as Mr. Dykstra said, we're switching cafeterias, and you guys have instructions on where to go for that. We'll continue on. We'll have a great little break. We'll see you back in a minute.